The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly as Madeline Vance stared at the tattered remains of her once sturdy boots, the sole hanging by threads, and the leather split beyond repair. 3 miles outside of San Antonio, on a dusty trail that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the horizon, she fought back tears of frustration. This wasn't how her journey west was supposed to unfold. "Damn it all," she muttered, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. The year was 1875, and Maddie, to the few who knew her well, had left behind everything familiar in Boston to answer a teaching position in San Antonio. The stagecoach had broken an axle 5 miles back, and the impatient driver had continued on with the mail and those passengers unwilling to wait for repairs, promising to send help. Maddie had decided to walk, confident in her ability to reach town before nightfall. Now, barefoot and with the sun descending toward the western hills, that confidence seemed foolish. Her stockings were already torn and the hot ground burned through the thin fabric. She gathered her skirts and sat at the edge of the trail, examining her feet with dismay. The distant sound of hoofbeats made her head snap up. Approaching from the direction of town was a lone rider, his silhouette gradually taking shape against the amber sky. Maddie stood quickly, smoothing her dress and hair, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. The man slowed his horse as he approached, and Maddie could see him clearly now, tall and broad-shouldered, with a worn Stetson pulled low over his face. His clothes were dusty but well kept, and the bay gelding beneath him was a fine animal. "Afternoon, madam," he said, tipping his hat to reveal sun-weathered features and surprisingly gentle green eyes. "Seems you've found yourself in a predicament." "My shoes," Maddie explained, gesturing to the ruined boots. "They've completely fallen apart, and I've still miles to go before reaching San Antonio." The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. He crouched to examine the broken footwear, then looked up at her with an expression that mingled concern and amusement. "Those city boots weren't made for Texas trails," he observed, standing to his full height. He towered over her 5'4" frame. "I'm Garrett Yates. Most folks call me Gray." "Madeline Vance," she replied, offering her hand, which he took briefly. "I was on the eastbound stage, but it broke down." The driver continued on, promising to send help. Gray snorted. "That'd be Pete Wilson. He's not known for reliability." He glanced at the setting sun, then back at her. "Town's still a fair piece away, and it'll be dark soon. Can't leave you out here." Before Maddie could respond, he bent slightly and swept her into his arms with surprising gentleness. "Mr. Yates," she protested, instinctively clutching at his shoulders. "What are you doing?" "Can't have you walking barefoot," he said matter-of-factly. "Rattlers come out at dusk, and there's thorns that'd cut your feet to ribbons." He settled her securely in his arms and walked toward his horse. "I can't possibly. Lean on me," he said, his voice softening. "I'll get you to town safe." There was something in his tone, a sincerity that silenced her protests. Gray managed to lift her onto his horse while supporting her weight, then swung up behind her in the saddle. "Hold steady now," he murmured, reaching around her to take the reins. His arms formed a secure bracket on either side of her, and despite herself, Maddie felt a flutter of something unfamiliar in her chest. As they rode toward San Antonio, the setting sun painted the landscape in hues of gold and crimson. Maddie found herself increasingly aware of the man behind her, his steady breathing, the gentle way he guided the horse, the faint scent of leather and sage that clung to his clothes. "What brings you to San Antonio, Miss Vance?" Gray asked, breaking the silence. "I'm to be the new school teacher," she replied. "The advertisement promised a proper schoolhouse and eager students." Gray's chuckle vibrated against her back. Well, there's a schoolhouse right enough. Can't speak for the eagerness of the pupils, though. Do you have children in the school, Mr. Yates? No, madam, never married. My ranch keeps me busy enough without adding family to the mix. Maddie nodded, unexpectedly pleased by this information. And is your ranch far from town? About 10 miles north. Decent spread with good water access. Been building it up these past 7 years. As they talked, Maddie learned that Gray had come to Texas after the war, where he'd served with the Union cavalry. He'd worked as a trail boss on cattle drives before saving enough to buy his land. Now, at 32, he ran a modest but growing cattle operation with the help of a few hired hands. The lights of San Antonio began to twinkle in the distance as darkness settled fully around them. Maddie felt an unexpected twinge of disappointment that their journey was nearing its end. "Where should I take you?" Gray asked as they approached the outskirts of town. "Do you have lodgings arranged?" The school board chairman, Mr. Whitfield, was to meet the stage. "I imagine he'll be at the station, wondering what's become of me." Gray nodded and guided his horse toward the stage coach station, a wooden building with lanterns illuminating its porch. As they approached, an older man paced anxiously out front. "That'll be Whitfield," Gray confirmed. When they reached the station, Whitfield rushed forward, his face creased with worry. "Miss Vance, we expected you hours ago." "The stage broke down, Mr. Whitfield," Maddie explained as Gray carefully helped her down from the horse. "And then my shoes gave out completely. If not for Mr. Yates's kindness, I'd still be stranded on the road." Whitfield's expression softened with relief, then hardened as he glanced at Gray. "Yates," he acknowledged stiffly. "Whitfield," Gray returned with equal coolness. Maddie glanced between them, sensing tension she didn't understand. "Well, we're grateful for your assistance," Whitfield said perfunctorily. "Miss Vance, I've arranged a room for you at Mrs. Hollister's boarding house. It's respectable and close to the school." "Thank you," Maddie said, then turned to Gray. "And thank you, Mr. Yates. I'm truly grateful for your help today." Gray tipped his hat. "My pleasure, Miss Vance. Perhaps I'll see you around town." "I hope so," she replied, the words escaping before she could consider them. His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners as he smiled. Then he mounted his horse and rode away, his silhouette gradually fading into the darkness. "You should be cautious about your associations, Miss Vance," Whitfield said as they walked toward a waiting wagon. "A school teacher must maintain certain standards." "Is there something improper about Mr. Yates?" Maddie asked, surprised. Whitfield's mouth tightened. "His cattle business has been quite successful, some say suspiciously so. There are rumors about altered brands and missing cattle." "Nothing proven, mind you, but where there's smoke." Maddie frowned, the accusation at odds with the honorable man who had carried her miles without complaint. "I've found rumors are often poor substitutes for facts, Mr. Whitfield." The older man harumphed, but said nothing more as he helped her into the wagon. As they drove to the boarding house, Maddie's thoughts remained with Gray Yates, his strong arms, and the gentleness in his green eyes when he'd told her to lean on him. Mrs. Hollister proved to be a plump, bustling widow in her 50s who welcomed Maddie warmly and showed her to a small but clean room on the second floor of her white-painted house. "You poor dear, all that way without proper shoes. We'll get you fitted at Miller's store tomorrow, Mrs. Hollister assured her. "For now, rest up. You've had quite an adventure for your first day in Texas." Alone at last, Maddie sank onto the bed, her feet throbbing but her mind full of the cowboy who had carried her to safety. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was long in coming. The next morning, Maddie rose early to prepare for her first day at the schoolhouse. After breakfast with Mrs. Hollister and the other two boarders, an elderly spinster who worked at the millinery, and a young bank clerk, Maddie set off for Miller's General Store to purchase new footwear. The bell above the door jingled as she entered the spacious store, where shelves and tables displayed everything from farming tools to fabric bolts. A middle-aged man with a friendly smile approached from behind the counter. "Morning, madam. You must be our new schoolteacher. Word travels fast in San Antonio." He extended his hand. "George Miller, my wife and I run this place." "Madeline Vance," she replied, shaking his hand. "I'm in desperate need of sturdy shoes. Mine didn't survive the journey." "So I heard," Miller said with a chuckle. "Garrett Yates was in earlier for supplies. Mentioned bringing you to town yesterday." Maddie felt her cheeks warm at the mention of Gray. "He was very kind." "That's Gray," Miller agreed easily. "One of the best men I know. Let's get you sorted with proper footwear." As Miller helped her find suitable shoes, Maddie cautiously asked, "Mr. Miller, I was given to understand that Mr. Yates might have a questionable reputation." Miller's bushy eyebrows shot up. "Who told you that nonsense? Was it Whitfield?" When Maddie didn't respond, he shook his head. "Figured as much. There's bad blood there, but it's not what you think. Gray's as honest as they come." "What happened between them?" Miller hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Whitfield's daughter Mary was sweet on Gray a few years back. He wasn't interested, told her kindly enough from what I heard. But she took it hard and Whitfield harder. Been looking for ways to discredit Gray ever since." "I see," Maddie murmured, relieved to hear this explanation. "Gray keeps to himself mostly, but he's respected. Helped plenty of folks during the drought 2 years back, extending credit for cattle feed, never calling in debts folks couldn't pay." Miller handed her a pair of practical leather boots. "These should serve you better than city shoes." Maddie purchased the boots along with other necessities and headed to the schoolhouse for her first meeting with the school board. The building was larger than she expected, a solid structure with wide windows and a small bell tower. Inside, she found Whitfield and 4 other board members waiting. The meeting progressed smoothly until Whitfield mentioned the upcoming school picnic, planned for the following weekend to welcome Maddie to the community. "We've invited all the respectable families," Whitfield emphasized, giving Maddie a significant look. "It's important to establish the right connections immediately." "I look forward to meeting everyone," Maddie replied carefully, "including Mr. Yates should he attend." A tense silence fell over the room. Whitfield cleared his throat. "As I mentioned yesterday, I've heard various perspectives," Maddie interrupted politely but firmly. "And I prefer to form my own judgments, Mr. Whitfield. Now, shall we discuss the curriculum?" The other board members exchanged glances, but the topic shifted. After the meeting, an older woman named Mrs. Prescott approached Maddie. "You've got spirit," she said approvingly. "Don't mind Whitfield. Garrett Yates is a good man. My son works for him, says he's the fairest boss in the county." "Thank you for telling me," Maddie replied, grateful for the confirmation. The following days passed in a blur of preparation. Maddie organized the schoolhouse, reviewed student records, and tried to memorize the names of San Antonio's inhabitants. She found herself scanning crowds for Gray whenever she ventured into town, but there was no sign of him. On Friday afternoon, as Maddie was leaving the schoolhouse, she was surprised to see Gray's bay gelding tied outside. The man himself stood on the porch, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Mr. Yates," she said, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. "What brings you to the schoolhouse?" "Miss Vance," he nodded, a smile warming his features. "I wanted to see how you were settling in. And to bring you these." He held out a small package wrapped in brown paper. Maddie unwrapped it to find a pair of beautiful leather gloves, supple yet clearly durable. "They're lovely," she said, touched by the thoughtfulness. "But why gloves?" "Texas sun's hard on skin, especially for those not used to it," he explained. "Thought they might be useful for your walks to and from school." "That's very kind of you. Would you walk with me? I'm heading back to the boarding house." Gray fell into step beside her, his long stride adjusting to match hers. As they walked, Maddie became aware of the glances they received from townspeople. "I believe we're causing a stir," she observed. "Small town," Gray replied with a shrug. "Not much happens that isn't noticed." "Mr. Whitfield suggested I should be cautious about associating with you," Maddie said directly, watching his reaction. Gray's jaw tightened, but he didn't seem surprised. "And what do you think about that advice?" "I think a man who carries a stranger for miles, asking nothing in return, deserves more than rumors and suspicion." His expression softened. "Whitfield has his reasons for disliking me, but they're personal, not criminal." "So I've heard," Maddie nodded. "His daughter, Mary," Gray confirmed. "Sweet girl, but young. She wanted more than I could give. Whitfield thought I'd let her on, but I never did." He looked at Maddie intently. "I don't make promises I can't keep." The sincerity in his voice stirred something in Maddie's chest. "Will you be at the picnic tomorrow?" "Wasn't planning on it. Not sure I'd be welcome." "I'm inviting you," Maddie said impulsively. "As my guest." Gray studied her face for a long moment. "You're new here, Miss Vance. Being seen with me might not help your standing." "I didn't come to Texas to be popular, Mr. Yates. I came to teach children and to live honestly." She held his gaze steadily. "Will you come?" A slow smile spread across his face. "For you, Miss Vance, I believe I will." They reached the boarding house too quickly for Maddie's liking. On the porch, she turned to him. "Until tomorrow, then." Gray took her hand, his touch warm and steady. "Until tomorrow." Maddie watched him ride away, her heart beating a rhythm she hadn't felt before. The picnic grounds near the river were bustling with activity when Maddie arrived the next day. Tables laden with food stood beneath shade trees. Children played games in open spaces, and groups of adults chatted in clusters. She greeted her future students and their parents, acutely aware that many conversations paused when she passed by. "They're curious about you, Mrs. Hollister explained, appearing at Maddie's side with a glass of lemonade. "A pretty young teacher from Boston is big news in a place like this. And my apparent friendship with Mr. Yates adds to the interest," Maddie guessed. Mrs. Hollister's eyes twinkled. "You catch on quick. Speaking of which." She nodded toward the edge of the gathering. Gray had arrived, looking uncommonly formal in a clean white shirt and vest. He stood apart from the crowd, searching the faces until he spotted Maddie. The smile he gave her sent warmth spreading through her despite the distance between them. "You go on," Mrs. Hollister encouraged. "Don't mind the gossips. This town needs shaking up now and again." Maddie made her way to Gray, aware of the eyes following her progress. "You came," she said, unable to hide her pleasure. "I said I would." He offered his arm. "Shall we join the festivities?" As they walked together, the crowd seemed to part before them. Some people greeted Gray warmly, others with reserve, but no one was openly hostile. They filled plates with fried chicken, corn bread, and potato salad, then found a spot beneath a cottonwood tree slightly removed from the main gathering. "This reminds me of the church socials back home," Maddie remarked as they ate. "Though the food is considerably spicier here." Gray chuckled. "Texas cooking takes some getting used to, like most things about this place." "What made you stay? After the war, I mean." Gray's expression grew thoughtful. "Space, I suppose. Room to breathe, to build something of my own. Pennsylvania felt crowded after what I'd seen." He glanced at her. "What about you? Teaching positions exist in Boston, too." Maddie considered the question. Similar reasons, in a way. After my parents died in '71, there wasn't much holding me there. I wanted somewhere new, somewhere I could define myself rather than be defined by loss. Gray nodded, understanding in his eyes. And are you finding that here? I believe I am, she said softly. Their conversation flowed easily from there, touching on books they'd read, places they'd seen, dreams they harbored. Maddie was surprised by Gray's knowledge of literature. He'd educated himself extensively after the war, devouring everything from Shakespeare to scientific journals. As the afternoon progressed, some of the children approached, curious about their teacher's companion. Gray proved remarkably good with them, showing the boys a trick with a lariat he'd brought and answering their questions about ranch life with patient humor. "You're natural with children," Maddie observed after they'd run off again. "Did you have younger siblings?" "2 sisters," Gray confirmed. "Both married now, living back east. I visit when I can." Before Maddie could respond, a shadow fell across them. Whitfield stood there, his expression severe. "Miss Vance," he said stiffly, "may I speak with you privately?" Gray tensed beside her, but Maddie laid a calming hand on his arm. "Anything you wish to say can be said in front of Mr. Yates," she replied evenly. Whitfield's mouth thinned to a line. "Very well. I find your conduct today inappropriate for someone in your position. The school teacher must set an example of propriety and good judgment." Maddie felt heat rising to her cheeks, not from embarrassment but from anger. "And what precisely about my conduct do you find inappropriate, Mr. Whitfield? Sharing a public meal with a respected rancher, having a conversation in full view of the entire town. You know perfectly well. I know that you harbor a personal grudge against Mr. Yates," Maddie interrupted, keeping her voice low but firm. "I know that you've attempted to damage his reputation with vague accusations. And I know that neither of these things reflects poorly on his character but rather on yours." Whitfield's face flushed dark red. "This is outrageous. The school board will hear of this." "I'm sure they will," Maddie agreed calmly. "And I'll be happy to discuss with them the difference between personal vendettas and professional concerns. Now, if you'll excuse us, we were enjoying the picnic." For a moment, Whitfield seemed struck speechless. Then, with a curt nod, he turned and strode away. "That," Gray said slowly, "was remarkable." Maddie exhaled, her hands trembling slightly from the confrontation. "I dislike conflict, but I dislike injustice more." Gray's expression was one of wonder. "You may have just made your position here considerably more difficult." "Perhaps," Maddie agreed, "but I couldn't do otherwise." He reached for her hand, his fingers warm around hers. "Thank you. Not many would take such a stand, especially for someone they barely know." The touch of his hand sent a current through Maddie that both alarmed and exhilarated her. "I feel as though I do know you," she admitted. "Is that strange?" "No," Gray said softly. "I feel the same." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility, until a shout from nearby broke the spell. A group was organizing a 3-legged race, and several children were calling for Maddie to participate. "Duty calls," she said with a small laugh, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. Gray helped her up. "I should head back to the ranch anyway. Got work waiting. Will I see you again soon?" Maddie asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "Count on it," he replied, his eyes warm with promise. True to his word, Gray began appearing regularly in town over the following weeks. Sometimes he would wait after school to walk Maddie home. Other times he would happen to be at the general store when she was shopping. Each encounter deepened their connection, and Maddie found herself increasingly drawn to the quiet strength and integrity she discovered in him. The threatened repercussions from Whitfield materialized in small ways: increased scrutiny of her teaching methods, nitpicking over school supplies, exclusion from certain social gatherings. But Maddie found she had more allies than enemies. Parents appreciated her dedication to their children's education, and many of the townsfolk seemed to enjoy witnessing Whitfield's discomfiture. One afternoon, in late October, Gray invited Maddie to ride out to his ranch that Sunday after church. "I'd like to show you what I've been building," he explained. "If you're interested." "I'd love to see it," Maddie replied, ignoring Mrs. Hollister's knowing smile from the porch where she was pretending not to listen. Sunday dawned clear and mild. After the church service, Gray helped Maddie onto a gentle mare he'd brought for her, and they rode north out of San Antonio. The landscape opened before them, rolling hills dotted with oak and mesquite, grasses rippling in the breeze, the occasional cattle raising their heads to watch them pass. "It's beautiful," Maddie said, breathing in the clean air. "So different from Boston." "Took me a while to see the beauty in it," Gray admitted. "When I first came, all I noticed was how harsh it could be, but there's something honest about this land. It doesn't pretend to be gentle, but it rewards those who respect it." They crested a hill, and Gray's ranch came into view in the valley below. The main house was modest but well built, with a wide porch and smoke curling from the chimney. Nearby stood a barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings, all maintained with evident care. Cattle grazed in fenced pastures, and a creek wound through the property. "Welcome to Sunrise Ranch," Gray said, a note of pride in his voice. "Named for the view from that ridge there. Best sunrises in Texas." As they approached, a tall man with graying hair emerged from the barn. "That's Samuel," Gray explained. "My foreman and the closest thing I have to family out here." Samuel greeted them warmly, his weathered face creasing with genuine pleasure when Gray introduced Maddie. "'Bout time he brought a lady out to see the place," Samuel commented, winking at Maddie. "Been telling him it needs a woman's touch." After Gray showed Maddie around the ranch buildings, they rode to the ridge he had mentioned. Dismounting, they stood together overlooking the property and the hills beyond. "I come here to think," Gray said quietly, "to remind myself why I work so hard." "It's worth it," Maddie said, understanding what the ranch represented to him, not just property, but purpose and pride. Gray turned to face her, his expression serious. "Maddie, I need to tell you something about Whitfield's accusations." "You don't need to explain, I want to," he insisted. "There's a kernel of truth that he's twisted. 3 years ago, I bought cattle from a man passing through. The price was fair, the paperwork seemed in order. Later, we discovered some had altered brands they'd been stolen from a ranch north of here." Maddie listened carefully as he continued. "I reported it immediately, returned the cattle to their rightful owner. The thief was eventually caught, but Whitfield seized on the incident. Started suggesting I'd known they were stolen, that I was involved in the rustling myself." Gray's jaw tightened. "My reputation survived because people who mattered knew the truth. But mud sticks, especially when someone keeps throwing it." "Thank you for telling me," Maddie said, touching his arm, "though it doesn't change my opinion of you." Gray covered her hand with his. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met, Madeline Vance." "I hope that's a good thing," she said lightly, though her heart was racing. "The best thing," he murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. The kiss, when it came, was gentle, at first a question more than a demand. When Maddie responded, her hands finding their way to his shoulders, Gray deepened the kiss, drawing her closer. Time seemed suspended as they stood together on the ridge, the Texas landscape spreading endlessly around them. When they finally parted, both a little breathless, Gray rested his forehead against hers. "I didn't plan that," he said, "but I've been wanting to do it since the day we met." "I'm glad you did," Maddie admitted, her cheeks flushed, though Mrs. Hollister would be scandalized. Gray laughed, the sound rich and free. Would it scandalize her more or less than knowing I intend to court you properly? Court me, Maddie echoed, her heart leaping. If you'll allow it. Gray's expression grew serious again. I know I'm just a rancher. You're not just anything, Garrett Yates, Maddie interrupted. And yes, I'll allow it. Their return to town that evening was accompanied by a sense of shared joy, a private happiness that sustained Maddie through the challenges of the weeks that followed. Word of their courtship spread quickly through San Antonio, generating reactions ranging from delight to disapproval. Whitfield redoubled his efforts to undermine Maddie's position, bringing complaints to the school board about her teaching methods and suggesting she was setting a poor example for impressionable young girls. The confrontation came to a head at the November school board meeting. Whitfield presented a formal motion to dismiss Maddie from her position, citing moral concerns and failure to uphold community standards. "Mr. Whitfield," said Mrs. Prescott, rising from her seat on the board, "would you care to elaborate on these vague accusations?" "Her association with Yates is inappropriate," Whitfield insisted. "A schoolteacher must be above reproach." "And what precisely is reproachable about Mr. Yates?" Mrs. Prescott pressed. "We all know his reputation. We know your opinion of him," interrupted George Miller, who also served on the board. "But facts, Whitfield. What facts can you present that make Miss Vance's friendship with a successful rancher inappropriate?" Whitfield sputtered, his face reddening. "It's more than friendship. They've been seen riding alone together, walking arm in arm through town." "Ah," said Mrs. Prescott dryly. "So the crime is courtship. Strange, I thought we encouraged respectable relationships between unmarried men and women." The other board members exchanged amused glances, and Maddie, watching from her seat at the side of the room, realized that Whitfield had overplayed his hand. "I move that we dismiss this complaint as without merit," said Miller firmly. "And further, that we formally commend Miss Vance for her excellent work in her first months of teaching." The motion passed with only Whitfield dissenting. As the meeting adjourned, Mrs. Prescott approached Maddie with a conspiratorial smile. "Don't you worry about Whitfield," she said. "His influence isn't what it was, and between us, many people are pleased to see Gray finding happiness. He's carried too much alone for too long." As November turned to December, Maddie and Gray's courtship deepened. They attended church together, shared meals at the hotel restaurant, and Gray began joining Maddie and Mrs. Hollister for Sunday dinners. The landlady, initially cautious, was won over by Gray's respectful manner and evident devotion to Maddie. "He looks at you like you hung the moon, Mrs. Hollister observed one evening after Gray had left. "And you look at him the same way." Maddie smiled, unable to deny it. "Is it that obvious to anyone with eyes?" Mrs. Hollister chuckled. "It's a beautiful thing to witness." The Christmas season brought fresh joy. The schoolhouse was decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, and Maddie's students performed a holiday pageant that drew the entire town. Gray sat in the front row, his face alight with pride as he watched Maddie direct the children. After the performance, as parents collected their offspring and the crowd began to disperse, Gray approached Maddie with a small wrapped package. "I know Christmas is still a week away," he said, suddenly looking nervous, "but I wanted to give you this privately." Maddie carefully unwrapped the gift to reveal a small book of poetry, Tennyson's works, bound in soft leather. "Open the cover," Gray urged softly. Inside he had inscribed, "To Madeline, who taught me the meaning of lean on me with all my heart, Gray." Tears pricked at Maddie's eyes as she looked up at him. "It's perfect," she whispered. "There's something else," Gray said, reaching into his pocket. He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Taking her hand, he pressed a small object into her palm. It was a ring, a delicate gold band with a small diamond that caught the lamplight. "I'm not asking yet," he said quickly, seeing her stunned expression. "It's too soon, I know that, but I wanted you to have it to know my intentions. When the time is right, if you feel the same, I'll ask properly." Maddie closed her fingers around the ring, emotion swelling in her chest. "Gray, you don't need to say anything now," he assured her. "Just keep it, as a promise of what could be." Instead of speaking, Maddie stretched up on her toes and kissed him gently, heedless of the few remaining parents in the schoolhouse. When she drew back, Gray's expression was one of such happiness that it took her breath away. "Merry Christmas, Madeline Vance," he murmured. "Merry Christmas, Garrett Yates," she replied, her heart full to bursting. The winter months passed in a blur of happiness for Maddie. She wore Gray's ring on a chain around her neck, hidden beneath her high-necked blouses, but a constant, secret joy. Their courtship progressed steadily, with Gray visiting town several times a week and Maddie riding out to the ranch on Sundays after church. February brought unusually severe weather to Texas. A blue norther swept down from the plains, dropping temperatures drastically and bringing icy rain that made travel treacherous. School was suspended for 3 days during the worst of the storm, and Maddie found herself restless in the confines of the boarding house, worried about Gray and his ranch. On the 4th day, as the storm finally abated, a rider appeared at the boarding house, not Gray, but Samuel, his foreman, looking exhausted and grim. "Miss Vance," he said when Maddie came to the door, "Gray's been hurt. Bad fall when a horse slipped on ice. He's asking for you." Cold fear gripped Maddie's heart. "How serious is it?" "Doc says no permanent damage, but he's laid up with a broken leg and some cracked ribs. Stubborn fool wouldn't let me come for you till today." Samuel's weathered face softened. "He didn't want to worry you during the storm." Within 30 minutes, Maddie had packed a bag and written a note to Mrs. Hollister explaining her absence. Samuel helped her onto his horse, and they set off for the ranch, traveling slowly over the still icy roads. When they arrived, Maddie found Gray confined to bed in the ranch house, his left leg splinted and bandaged, dark bruises visible on what she could see of his chest above the blanket. His face lit up when she entered the room, though pain tightened the corners of his eyes. "You shouldn't have come in this weather," he chided gently, reaching for her hand. "You shouldn't have waited 2 days to send for me," she countered, squeezing his fingers. Samuel discreetly left the room, closing the door behind him. "How bad is it really?" Maddie asked, perching carefully on the edge of the bed. Gray grimaced. "Broken femur, 3 cracked ribs, more bruises than I care to count. Doc says I'll heal clean if I stay off the leg for 6 weeks. He looked frustrated. "Spring roundup's coming, can't manage the ranch from a bed." "Samuel seems capable," Maddie observed. "And you have other hands." "It's not the same," Gray sighed. "This place is my responsibility." Maddie studied him, understanding his frustration. "Perhaps you need to lean on others for a change," she suggested gently. "The way you once told me to lean on you." Gray's expression softened. "Using my own words against me, Miss Vance." "If they're wise words, Mr. Yates." A comfortable silence fell between them. Maddie helped Gray sit up more comfortably against the pillows, then fetched water and the medicine the doctor had left. "Will you stay?" Gray asked as she arranged things on the bedside table. "Just for tonight. Samuel can take you back tomorrow." Maddie hesitated. It wasn't proper, but Gray was injured and the roads were still dangerous. "Mrs. Garcia, the cook, has a room off the kitchen," Gray added, seeing her uncertainty. "She's agreed to chaperone if that helps your decision." Maddie smiled at his consideration for her reputation. "Then yes, I'll stay." She spent the evening reading to Gray from the Tennyson book he had given her, discussing the poems and sharing stories. Mrs. Garcia, a motherly Mexican woman who clearly adored Gray, brought them a simple but delicious dinner which they ate together in his room. When Gray finally dozed off, exhausted by pain and medication, Maddie sat watching him sleep, her heart full of emotions she was only now beginning to fully understand. It wasn't just affection or attraction she felt for this man, it was deeper, more profound. Love, she realized with startling clarity. She loved him. The knowledge settled in her chest like a warm stone. She reached for the chain around her neck, drawing out the ring he had given her at Christmas. It was time, she decided. When he was better, when he could stand on his own 2 feet again, she would tell him she was ready for him to ask his question. Maddie returned to town the next day, but came back to the ranch every weekend, gradually taking on more responsibilities as Gray's recovery progressed. She helped with correspondence, read aloud from agricultural journals, and learned about the business side of ranching. By the time the 6 weeks had passed, and Gray was permitted to move about on crutches, Maddie had become as familiar with the ranch operations as with her schoolhouse. Spring arrived in a rush of wildflowers and new calves. Gray's recovery continued steadily, though he remained frustrated by his limited mobility. Maddie noticed him watching her with increasing intensity during her visits, as though trying to memorize her features. One April evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Gray finally spoke what was on his mind. "I've been thinking about the future," he said, his voice unusually hesitant. "About what I want, what I can offer." Maddie's heart quickened. "And what conclusions have you reached?" Gray turned to face her, his expression serious. "That I love you, Madeline Vance. That I want to build a life with you, but I need to be honest about what that life would entail." He gestured toward the ranch spread out before them. "This is my world. It's demanding, sometimes dangerous, often isolated. You'd be miles from town, from the society you're accustomed to." Gray, he held up a hand. "Please let me finish. You're educated, cultured. You deserve more than a rancher's wife's existence. I've been selfish, wanting you here. But I need to know that you understand what you'd be giving up." Maddie stood, moved to the railing, then turned back to him. "Are you finished?" Gray nodded, his expression guarded. "Good. Because while you've been worrying about my sacrifice, you've failed to notice something important." She approached him again, kneeling beside his chair to meet his eyes. "I've never been happier than these past months sharing your life. I love teaching, yes, but I love you more, Garrett Yates, and there's no reason I can't do both." Gray's brow furrowed. "Both?" "The school is only 5 miles away. I could ride there daily, continue teaching if we wished, or eventually, when we have children of our own, perhaps I could teach them here." Maddie's cheeks flushed at her own boldness in mentioning children, but she continued. "The point is, loving you doesn't mean giving up who I am. It means building something new together." Hope dawned in Gray's eyes. "You've thought about this?" "Of course I have," Maddie smiled. "Did you think I was riding out here every weekend just to read you agricultural reports?" A slow smile spread across Gray's face. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a familiar object, the ring, removed from its chain. "I was going to wait until I could properly kneel," he said, a catch in his voice. "But I find I can't wait another day." He took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "Madeline Vance, will you marry me?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "With all my heart, yes." The ring slid onto her finger as if it had always belonged there. Gray pulled her close, his kiss a seal on their promise, his arms strong around her despite the months of recovery. "When?" he asked when they finally parted. "June," Maddie decided. "After the school term ends, that gives us 2 months to prepare." Gray laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. 2 months. It seems both too long and not nearly enough time. "For what we're building," Maddie said, resting her head against his shoulder. "We have a lifetime." News of their engagement spread quickly through San Antonio. Most reactions were positive congratulations, well wishes, offers of help with wedding preparations. Mrs. Hollister wept happy tears and immediately began planning the wedding breakfast. The schoolchildren were delighted, especially when Maddie assured them she would continue teaching at least through the next year. Whitfield's response was predictably sour, but his influence had waned significantly. When he attempted to raise concerns at a town meeting, he found himself firmly outvoted on every issue. By May, rumors circulated that he was considering a move to Austin, where his brother had a business. The wedding preparations consumed much of Maddie's free time. Letters flew back and forth to her friends in Boston, several of whom promised to attend despite the distance. Gray's sisters wrote that they would come with their husbands, eager to meet the woman who had captured their brother's heart. As June approached, Gray's recovery progressed to the point where he discarded his crutches entirely, though he still walked with a slight limp that the doctor assured him would eventually fade. The ranch thrived under his and Samuel's management, with the spring roundup completed successfully, despite Gray's initial absence from the saddle. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with a gentle breeze tempering the June heat. The ceremony was held in the white-painted church on San Antonio's Main Street, filled to capacity with friends, neighbors, and students. Maddie wore a gown of ivory silk, ordered from a dressmaker in St. Louis and altered by Mrs. Hollister's skilled hands. Gray stood tall in a new black suit, his limp barely noticeable as he watched Maddie walk toward him down the aisle. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, exchanged with steady voices and unwavering gazes. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Gray kissed Maddie with a tenderness that brought tears to more than one observer's eyes. The celebration afterward spilled from Mrs. Hollister's boarding house into the adjacent garden and street, with tables laden with food, musicians playing lively tunes, and children darting between clusters of talking adults. Gray's sisters welcomed Maddie warmly into the family, sharing stories of their brother's childhood that made him grown good-naturedly. As evening fell and lanterns were lit throughout the garden, Gray found Maddie sitting for a moment of quiet at a table beneath an old oak tree. "Happy, Mrs. Yates?" he asked, sliding into the chair beside her. The name sent a thrill through Maddie. "Completely," she assured him, taking his hand. Though also a little overwhelmed, Gray nodded understandingly. "It's a lot to take in, but we have tomorrow and all the days after to ourselves." "At home," Maddie said, testing the word. "Home," Gray agreed, his expression tender. "Though I should warn you that Samuel and the hands have been busy in your absence. They've made some improvements to the house." "What kind of improvements? You'll see," he said mysteriously. "It's their wedding gift to us." Later that night, as their carriage approached the ranch, Maddie gasped in surprise. The house was illuminated with lanterns, and a large banner hung from the porch. "Welcome home, Mrs. Yates." But it was the addition to the house that truly startled her, a new wing extending from the eastern side, with wide windows and a small covered porch of its own. "What is it?" she asked as Gray helped her from the carriage. "See for yourself," he invited, leading her up the steps and through the main house to a door she hadn't noticed before. Opening it, he revealed a spacious room lined with empty bookshelves, a large desk positioned to catch the morning light, and comfortable chairs arranged near a small fireplace. "A study?" Maddie asked, turning in a circle to take it all in. "For you," Gray confirmed. "Samuel thought you might want a place of your own, somewhere to prepare lessons, write letters, read in peace." He looked suddenly uncertain. "Do you like it?" Maddie threw her arms around him, her heart too full for words. Gray held her close, his cheek resting against her hair. "I'll take that as approval," he murmured, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "It's perfect," she managed finally. "All of it. You, this place, our life together." That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Maddie traced the lines of Gray's face with gentle fingers. "Do you remember the day we met?" she asked softly. "Every detail," Gray assured her. "You standing there on the trail, looking so determined despite your broken shoes." "I was frightened," she admitted. "Alone in a strange place miles from town. Then you appeared and told me to lean on you." "Best thing I ever said," Gray murmured, kissing her palm. "Little did I know you'd end up being my strength as much as I was yours." "That's what marriage should be," Maddie said thoughtfully. "Two people supporting each other through whatever comes." Gray gathered her closer. "Whatever comes," he agreed. "Together." In the year that followed, Maddie and Gray built their life together with the same care and dedication they brought to both ranch and schoolhouse. Maddie continued teaching, riding to town each morning and returning in the afternoons. Gray's business prospered, allowing them to expand the ranch and improve the breeding stock. They fell into comfortable routines: breakfast together at dawn, separate days of work, evenings spent sharing stories of their respective experiences. Weekends were for ranch projects, visits to town, or simply enjoying each other's company. Through it all, their love deepened, becoming as much a part of their lives as the land beneath their feet. When winter came again, bringing with it their first anniversary of meeting, Gray surprised Maddie with a special dinner at the ranch house, prepared by Mrs. Garcia and served by candlelight. "I have something for you," he said as they finished their dessert, producing a small wrapped package. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a miniature boot. "To commemorate the day your shoes fell apart," Gray explained with a smile. "The day that changed everything." Maddie laughed as he fastened it around her wrist. "It's perfect, and I have something for you as well." She hesitated, suddenly nervous. "Though it's not something I can wrap." Gray waited, his expression curious. "In about 7 months," Maddie said carefully, "our family will be growing by one." For a moment, Gray looked confused. Then understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by a joy so profound it transformed his features. "A baby! We're having a baby," Maddie nodded, tears of happiness filling her eyes. "Dr. Williams confirmed it yesterday." Gray was out of his chair in an instant, pulling Maddie to her feet and into his arms. "A baby," he repeated in wonder, his hand gently covering her still flat stomach. "Our child." The months that followed were filled with preparations. Gray insisted on building a cradle himself, laboring over it in the evenings while Maddie sewed tiny garments. The spare bedroom adjacent to theirs was transformed into a nursery, painted a cheerful yellow since they didn't know if they were expecting a son or daughter. Maddie continued teaching until the end of the spring term, when her condition became too obvious to ignore. The school board, now led by Mrs. Prescott since Whitfield's departure for Austin, granted her a leave of absence with the understanding that she might return when she felt ready. Summer brought scorching heat and the final months of Maddie's pregnancy. She moved more slowly now, spending mornings in her study and afternoons resting in the shade of the porch. Gray hovered anxiously, arranging for a young woman from town to help with household tasks and insisting that Dr. Williams visit the ranch weekly. "You're fussing too much," Maddie told him one evening as they sat watching the sunset, her hands resting on her swollen belly. "Probably," Gray admitted with a sheepish smile, "but I can't help it. You and the baby, you're everything to me." Maddie leaned against him, content despite the discomfort of late pregnancy. "We're fine," she assured him, "though your son or daughter seems determined to use my ribs for kicking practice." As if in response, the baby moved vigorously, making Gray laugh as he felt the motion beneath his palm. "Strong," he observed proudly, "like their mother." "And stubborn," Maddie added, "like their father." Their son arrived in early August, a healthy, robust boy with a shock of dark hair and Gray's green eyes. They named him James Samuel Yates, honoring both Maddie's father and the friend who had become family to them. "He's perfect," Gray whispered, cradling the infant with careful hands that seemed too large for such a tiny being. "Absolutely perfect." Maddie watched them from the bed, exhausted but filled with a happiness so complete it seemed almost too much to bear. This was her family, her husband and son, her home, her life built from choices made and love freely given. In the years that followed, the Yates family flourished. James grew into a sturdy, curious boy who followed his father around the ranch and sat attentively through his mother's reading lessons. Maddie eventually returned to teaching part-time, bringing James with her to the schoolhouse until he was old enough to stay with Gray during her absences. Their daughter, Elizabeth, arrived 3 years after James, a delicate girl with Maddie's auburn hair and thoughtful expression. Gray doted on her shamelessly, building her a small rocking chair that matched Maddie's and carrying her on his shoulders to see the new calves each spring. The ranch expanded steadily, with Gray's careful management and innovative breeding practices earning recognition throughout Texas. Maddie's reputation as an educator grew similarly, with former students often returning to thank her for the foundation she had provided for their later successes. On the 10th anniversary of their first meeting, Gray and Maddie rode together to the spot on the trail where her shoes had fallen apart. The landscape had changed little, the same rolling hills, the same vast sky overhead. They dismounted and stood together, hands clasped, remembering. "If my shoes hadn't broken that day," Maddie mused, "if another traveler had come along instead of you." "I don't believe that would have happened," Gray said firmly. "Some things are meant to be, Maddie. Some paths are laid out before we even know we're walking them." Maddie leaned against his shoulder, thinking of all they had built together, their home, their children, their intertwined lives. "I'm glad my shoes fell apart," she said softly. "And I'm even more glad it was you who found me." Gray wrapped his arm around her, his expression one of profound contentment. "Lean on me," he murmured, echoing the words he'd spoken a decade earlier. "Always." "Always," Maddie agreed, her heart as full as the Texas sky above them. And as they rode back toward the ranch where their children waited toward the life they had created together, Maddie knew with absolute certainty that from that first meeting on a dusty Texas road to this moment of established happiness, every step had led them exactly where they were meant to be. Together, supporting each other, through all that had come and all that would come. Two lives, once separate, now so thoroughly intertwined that neither could imagine existence without the other. It had started with broken shoes and a stranger's kindness. It had grown into a love story written across the Texas landscape, in a schoolhouse and a ranch, in two children's laughter, in quiet evenings and busy mornings, in challenges faced and joys shared. As the ranch came into view, with James and Elizabeth running to meet them at the gate, Maddie caught Gray's eye and saw in his expression the same certainty she felt that of all the paths they might have walked in life. This one together was the only one that truly mattered.